Is it time to give up on the winds of winter? Yes, that's my answer. I think it's time to give up on any definitive conclusion to a Game of Thrones. Because, let's be real, even if we get the winds of winter, we aren't getting a dream for spring, so a Game of Thrones will have no ending. If that's the case, why is this video over an hour and a half long? Well, instead of waiting for a book to come out that probably never will, I thought, as a fandom, why don't we make our own book? Now, you're probably thinking that I'm no George R.R. Martin, so why bother? Well, that's the point, because the book I'm making isn't mine, it's ours, or rather, you get to decide what happens. So, in June of 2024, we started a medieval choose-our-own-adventure story here on this channel called The Queen Games. It is essentially Game of Thrones meet The Hunger Games, with the tagline being 9 women, 1 crown. You guys decided what choices the protagonist, Kara, made, and in early of 2025, we hired an art studio to bring this choose-your-own-adventure to life. And now, I am proud to announce that the first ever book made by a YouTube audience is being traditionally published on January 18th, 2026, the same day as the release of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Now, I want to stress, my name is not going on the book. The book doesn't belong to me or any specific person, it's ours. Now, every 2 weeks, we'll be making a video where we respond to every single comment you guys make related to this project so that you know your feedback is being addressed. Also, on the first of every month, we'll release the next choice in the Choose Your Own Adventure in our community tab. If you pre-order the book or join our YouTube memberships, you will get your name inside the book for as little as $2. However, before pre-ordering or signing up to the YouTube memberships, watch the first hour and a half of the Queen Games and decide for yourself whether you want to be a part of this project. And with all that said, allow me to introduce Book 1 of the Queen Games.
Kara read the words she'd been waiting all her life to hear. You have been chosen to represent Rider class in the upcoming Queen Games tournament between the 8 cultures of Eurasia to determine the future queen of the conquerors. May the swiftness of your steed and the fierceness of your pride lead you to victory. The words brought a squeal through my teeth as I eagerly leapt to my feet. I contained my excitement despite wanting to scream and composed myself for breakfast with the queen. It took longer than it should have to calm myself down as I reached for the shelf and pulled out a gown. I looked in the mirror and tied my hair in a bun, wanting to look my best for the queen and her son. I examined myself before leaving the pit house to eat with the man who might one day be my spouse. Though the queen had invited me to live at the palace, my parents had said she wanted not me, but my talents. The queen had recognized my potential for riding bareback and had personally trained me in horse-to-horse combat. She's been more of a mother than my own had ever been, and I only wanted to stay since living here was a dream. Unlike the 7 girls who would compete to become his wife, the queen had allowed me to be a part of her son's life. The 2 of us met occasionally when we trained every day, but whenever we spoke, I had nothing witty to say. I stepped into the hall, where it was no surprise to me that the Conqueror King wasn't seated with us for tea. My mentor and her son, the prince, sat alone, eating vegetables prepared in the copper stove. "Good morning, Kara. You're a little late," the queen said. "Apologies, I woke with too many knots in my hair." As I approached the table and sat at my place, I hoped that the red would leave my face. My mentor had delivered the letter that morning and told me only we knew and to tell her son shortly. I wished all these thoughts hadn't erupted in my mind before I'd even had a chance to greet them both in kind. The 3 of us sat in silence, serving the food on our own because it was Conqueror custom to eat our meals alone. The queen placed her fork down, breaking the silence. "Well, I've had a shortage of excitement this morning. Kara, have you received any letters lately?" But she only had eyes for her son. I almost choked on my spoonful of chickpeas, but the prince was too busy eating to notice. "I did receive good news, I had to admit. Care to share it with us?" the queen demanded. The look I gave the queen was one of pleading, but my mentor only waited to hear what I would say. Here are the 4 choices Kara can make. She can take the prince somewhere private to tell him, Do what the queen wants and tell the prince now. Ask the queen to leave and then tell the prince. Or don't tell the prince yet and wait for a better time.
Hi guys, it's Jen and I'm joined with Mel again. And we are just going to be going through the choices for the first chapter of the Queen Games, which we're really proud of. So let's see what you guys said. So for our first choice, and we're really happy with this one, taking Cara to go tell the prince the news in private. We thought that was a really, really good choice, like prioritizing her relationship with the prince over the queen's. It's just great for all the romance and stuff, so really happy with that. So we will move on now to choice 2.
Cara decided what to do. If you don't mind, I told my mentor, could I please tell the prince later, maybe in private? The queen paused, staring at me, before quickly acquiescing. Of course. Unexpectedly, the prince asked, did you receive good news from your parents? Though he was still too engrossed in his meal to meet our gazes. No, I replied. I haven't heard from them since last month. Talking about my parents always soured my mood. They were in the western horizon when they last sent a rider. As he finally looked up from his plate, I pursed my lips together and nodded, trying to hide my discomfort beneath a thin smile. I loved my parents, I supposed, but they'd never been with me for more than a few weeks since they'd delivered me to the royal palace. The queen pressed her napkin delicately to her mouth and stood with a grace I could only hope to emulate one day. Well, I have a few things I need to get in order. Please, continue without me. Again, she shot me that knowing glance. When the queen's footsteps disappeared from the dining hall, I sat patiently and watched the prince devour the rest of the food that had been prepared for 3 and hardly eaten by 2 of us. Now was the moment to tell him about the letter, I thought. The prince leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and stared up at the ceiling. I opened my mouth to say the elders had sent their decision, but instead I asked him, anything you'd like to do today? The prince's eyes slowly made their way down to me. Let's go riding. I almost squealed. Horse riding was my favorite pastime. I also took a particular pride in the fact that it was the only physical sport in which my skills far outshone the prince. He was an excellent rider, of course, but I was better. I arranged to meet the prince at the stables and went to my room to change into my riding gear and boots. Besides the queen, I alone could wield weapons without a saddle. The prospect of fighting 7 other women from 7 other classes to life-threatening extremes didn't particularly excite me, but the thought of being with the prince as his queen made it all worth it. I stepped across the palace grounds towards the stables, breathing in the fresh summer air. The king's stallions glanced up at me when I entered and whickered in greeting. I smiled to see the prince had already taken Sasha, my own horse, from her stall and now brushed her down. Sasha snorted when she caught sight of me and dipped her head, her reddish mane floating down her neck. Are you finding it difficult to be on time today? The prince asked, patting Sasha down with a gentle hand. I'm sorry, I quipped, lifting my hands to stroke the horse's neck and say hello. I didn't realize we were on a schedule. The prince always complained about his schedule, and the joke just popped into my head. He chuckled, then turned to the wall to lift Sasha's saddle, straps, and reins from its hook, before slumping it all into my arms. Then he headed to the far end of the stables, where he led from the stall the largest stallion I had ever seen. The massive horse plodded dutifully behind its rider. I quickly tacked my own horse, double-checked the straps, then stepped gracefully up into the saddle. I'd been riding Sasha since I was old enough to sit a horse, and we'd reached the perfect level of trust and communication. I didn't ride any of the others. The prince, on the other hand, burned through a stallion every year or 2, which was typical for conquerors. I waited for the prince to tack up his stallion, and with a quick wink from him, he burst into a gallop, racing ahead of me, and I quickly chased after him. Sasha didn't take much coaxing. Both the mare and I were only too familiar with the prince's riding habits, and we both enjoyed a good chase. Still, we maintained a steady distance behind the prince, following him whenever he wanted to go through the sprawling meadows. With the wind in my face and the reins almost completely slack in my hands, I gave myself over to my love of riding. The rolling hills spread before me, the blue sky glinted around the sun, and I found myself wondering how one man could rule all of Eurasia in its entirety. It struck me as odd to think that the boy galloping away on the horse in front of me would sit upon his father's throne to rule it all himself, and he would bring whichever woman rose victorious from the Queenmaker series with him at his side. We rode for the better part of an hour until the prince pulled his horse into a slow canter. The stallion's faltering stumble did not go unnoticed, and my heart ached for the poor, exhausted creature. The prince leapt from his horse beside a grove of elm and waited for me and my horse to join him. I dismounted in the shade beneath the elm's branches. I'd never met a conqueror much different than the prince in most respects. Every one of them grew to at least 6 foot. Skin as gray as spring storm clouds, and eyes the color of rust. For the longest time, I had not thought to distinguish them much from other men. The people of Eurasia had a wide range of heights, masses, and skin colors, so even the conqueror's appearance didn't seem so out of place despite their unnaturalness. But I had come to learn, studying past conqueror kings who led their bands into battle, that this race of men had only one true purpose: war. The conquerors were harmless when they didn't wield an axe or sword, gentle in a surprisingly docile way. I had seen the way the king and queen expressed their affections for each other, and even the prince, from the moment we'd met, had never been a brutish soul. Sometimes a little curt, more often completely oblivious. He'd still never raised his voice in anger or acted toward me with anything but kindness and compassion. This was probably due to his mother's raising, meaning a queen not only gets to rule through her husband, but also gets to shape the future king as well. With a smile I hoped didn't look as nervous as it felt, I went to join the prince. Sitting beside him in silence, I removed my riding gloves and studied his face. The prince had his arms crossed behind his head, and his breathing was so light he almost looked like he was sleeping. Like most conquerors, the prince was neither heartbreakingly handsome nor impossibly grotesque, just different. His features were like the rest of him, built well with strong, rough lines, and his smooth gray skin shimmered now with the barest traces of sweat at his hairline. "So," I started, "the Queenmaker series is almost upon us. Are you looking forward to it?" Then I cringed at how ridiculous that question had sounded. Thankfully, the prince didn't open his eyes to see my recoiling face and merely shrugged, which was his response for almost everything. My stomach churned with apprehension, but I forged on because it was probably now or never. "I thought you'd be more excited." The prince shrugged again, his eyes still closed. Being forced to marry a complete stranger is not something you look forward to. But what if you did know them? The prince opened his eyes. I clenched my fists, my heart pounding in my chest as I blurted out, "My letter this morning was from the elders. They chose me as the rider class champion." The prince lurched from his careless position and propped himself up on his side to finally look at me with a frown. "There must be a mistake. Isn't my queen supposed to be among the best fighters Eurasia has to offer?" My entire world stopped with that one question, and I felt the heat rising in my cheeks as if he'd slapped me. All I could do was stare at him with wide eyes, waiting, just waiting. Then the prince let out a chuckle and shook his head. "I'm clearly joking," he nudged me playfully. "It was so obvious this morning." "You knew!" A nervous laugh escaped me, and I reached up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Honestly, now that I know you'll be competing, a part of me is more excited than I've ever been." I wanted to look away from him, but couldn't. This was the only time he'd ever hinted at having romantic affection for me, and even this was a vague hint. It was the last thing I'd expected from him. The prince grinned, holding my gaze with his red-brown eyes. "I've always enjoyed training with you," he continued. "I look forward to watching you fight." Do I dare ask this next question? "So, you wouldn't mind me being the mother of your child?" The prince seemed to study me with his eyes. "You would be a wonderful mother, and an even better queen." Choice time. We should be honest and transparent and reciprocate his feelings. It's what we want, and as it turns out, it's what he wants as well. No, this isn't how the Queen Games is meant to be played. He might think less of us if he perceives us as trying to seduce him. Ignore all that. Nobody needs to know, and this is something we've been waiting all our lives to do, and we might never get another chance. You're all idiots. We should hint at feeling the same way, but hold off until it is most advantageous to us. Let's be smart about this and win the Queen Games.
Hey guys, and we're back for the second choice. So, the They're flirting with the prince. We weren't the biggest fan of this choice. We just didn't think it was really in Kara's nature to be the manipulative, like some of the other girls joining will be. Ooh, spoiler. But yeah, we just thought it was more, especially with the romance, because she actually likes the prince, it would be better to keep her, more honest with him. So I wasn't the biggest fan, but we will see where the story goes. Okay, on to choice 3.
Kara blushed, grabbing her hair in a fist and using it to hide part of her face. An excellent mother and an even better queen. But I would be your wife first and foremost. Is that something you want? Now it was the prince's turn to blush. That too. Kara released her hair, letting it drop like a waterfall. She leaned forward so close they were breathing the same air before looking up at him. But if you want me to be your wife, I'll need to win the queen games. Kara felt the prince's mood dampen at that. His face, usually a mask of regal composure, crumbled just slightly. I know, he said, his voice thick with discomfort. Look, I want you to win. I want to help you win, but I can't be seen openly rigging the queen games. The other cultures would revolt, and my father and his wars have given them enough reason to. He sighed deeply, his gaze turning distant, lost in thought. But there is a way. How? Kara asked, her fingers lightly stroking his arm, a gesture both intimate and calculating. My father. What about him? Her voice was barely a whisper, laden with curiosity and dread. He sent me a letter a while back and told me about this female prisoner of war he has. He wrote that she's the best fighter he has ever seen, even better than my mother. He asked me if I wanted to include her in the Queen Games as a way to help incorporate his new eastern provinces. I wrote back no, but he insisted on sending her so I could look at her to help change my mind. And you want to go look at her? No, not me. I want you to go. The prince's gaze bore into hers, unwavering. See, if she would be amenable to helping you become queen, you could offer her anything, I suppose. And with her, if she's as good as my father claims, there are ways she could help you win. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken risks and promises. If the other cultures knew what the prince was suggesting, they would be incensed to the point of revolt. Archer, saber, knight, and assassin cultures would be the first to rebel, Kara knew, but she supposed that'd only be the case if they found out. Ride east to Vagra, the border town between Saber and Lancer territory. That is where you will find her. Why don't you come? It's not for me to know if I can trust her, but you. I'll also need to stay here and announce her inclusion. It will cause a ruckus, but my father has already approved it. It would be days of hard riding, but knew she could do it in time. Are we really doing this? Kara asked, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know. Are we? The prince's eyes narrowed, and Kara held her breath, both of them waiting to see if the other would flinch. Kara exhaled. I guess we are. How do I know if I can trust her? The prince shrugged. I don't know. I guess that is for you to decide. Okay. If I ride hard and fast, I could be there and back well before the opening ceremony. Not ideal with the Queen Games only around the corner, but it is possible. The prince pried a royal ring from his fingers, the weight of it gleaming with authority, and dropped it into Kara's lap. Use that. Order the men there to escort the girl and yourself back to the provincial palace. Use that time to decide if you can trust her or not. Okay, all right, Kara said, trying to convince herself. I guess I leave now. Yes, you probably should. We don't have time for a lengthy goodbye, and your absence will be noted. Kara stood to leave, her movements deliberate. Wait, what culture is she from? You said the East? Officially, her people have been designated Katana culture. They've been given the color white. And how do I find her once I reach the town? Just ask the men there for the king's prize, and they will locate her for you. I see. Kara whistled, and Sasha, her loyal steed, trotted towards her, her hooves stirring up blades of grass. Should I ride with you? The prince asked, his voice tinged with concern. No, I'll reach the palace faster if I go by myself. And besides, your horse needs to rest a bit longer. Kara lifted herself up and mounted Sasha with unusual rigidity. I'll see you in 12 moons' time. You will, Kara promised, before pushing her hips forward and feeling Sasha charge headlong the way they came. The wind whipped her hair back, and as the trees receded into the distance, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down upon her, heavy and unrelenting. 5 moons later. "Careful," Kara shouted, reaching out toward the soldiers dragging the katana girl between them in chains. "I'm sure neither of you want to explain to the prince why you displeased him." Both men turned to look at her, their lips pressed tightly together, as if they were biting down to avoid saying something they might regret. The two of them stepped more cautiously towards the royal wagon the king had left for the prince. Kara had been told the wagon would be necessary to transport the katana girl while she recovered from her injuries, adding days to their trip back. She waited for the soldiers to step back out of the wagon before she ducked inside to see the katana girl laid out on the wide bed, bandages stretching from her shoulder to her hip. The girl looked half dead and starved, but there was a fierceness in her that Kara could not help but notice. Kara examined the wagon's interior. It was spacious enough for 2 beds, a table, cabins, and room enough to walk. The outside baggage train bustled with Saber culture soldiers transferring goods and provisions to the Rider culture soldiers who would be escorting her back into her homeland as ordered by the prince. The katana girl didn't wake for anything more than a few sips of water. Kara stayed by her side those first 2 days of their voyage, wondering what kind of conversation they'd have when the girl woke and found herself on a wagon belonging to the man who supposedly struck her down. But even when she did wake up, the girl didn't seem interested in talking, or even particularly conscious, on those few occasions when Kara could offer her a little water and nothing else. But the royal healers were very good, and on the 3rd morning, the katana girl's fever broke. She opened her eyes, groaned, and slowly pushed herself up to sit against the headboard. Kara had been dozing on the bed when she found the katana staring at her with neither the anger nor the misery she'd expected. The girl looked confused and alarmed. A bowl of cold beef, chickpea, and millet sat on the low shelf against the far wall, and Kara stood to retrieve it. She'd had a meal prepared for the girl every day, despite never knowing when her new companion would wake up. With the bowl in hand, Kara knelt beside the bed, set the bowl on the padding beside the girl's legs, and offered her a cup of water. The katana girl studied Kara's face for a little longer, then lifted a piece of meat and gave it a tentative sniff. "What is this?" she asked. Kara couldn't help but smile. "It's beef," she replied, then nodded at the tray, "and millet." The katana sniffed again and wrinkled her nose. Kara pressed just a little. "I was surprised to hear you speak Conqueror. Where did you learn it?" The girl drank from the cup of water. "My mother came from Saber territory, but fled to my father's homeland when she came of age." All of Katana would soon be speaking the Conqueror tongue, Kara thought, now that the Conquerors were adding them as the 9th territory. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Rena," the girl replied, staring at the bandages across her chest. "I'm Kara." The girl drank more water and still didn't look at Kara when she asked, "Why am I here?" "We're riding back to Rider territory," Kara said. "Then we'll journey to the provincial palace where the opening ceremony of the Queen Games will take place." Slowly, Rena finally lifted her head to look Kara in the eye. "Do you take all your prisoners of war back home with you in such lavish wagons?" The question oozed sarcasm, but Kara had to admit the katana girl had a point. She sighed. "No, the prince wants you back at the capital to compete in the Queenmaker series." When Rena narrowed her eyes in confusion, Kara realized she had a lot more explaining to do than she'd expected. Very soon, Rider culture will host the 23rd Queenmaker series to determine the next queen. One girl from each of the 8 cultures comes to battle in the tournament. The victor among the 8 weds the conqueror prince and rules at his side when he takes the throne. Then she realized her mistake and added, "I suppose it's the victor among 9 competing queens now." Kara tried to smile, but it felt forced. "You'll be the 9th. The katana girl said nothing and looked up to sweep her gaze across the thick curtains over the wagon's far wall and the small nets of rope dangling from the roof. "Why me?" "You caught the king's attention when you fought him," Kara said, trying to subdue her jealousy at this fact. "I think he admired your skill. Being a representing champion in the Queenmaker tournament is actually a high honor. It also makes the katana culture's transition into Eurasia a little easier if everyone has a reason to come together now that the war is over." The katana stared at Kara for an uncomfortably long time. "I'm sure that will make up for all the people who died." Kara glanced down at her lap and hoped the flush she felt hadn't colored her cheeks enough to show. It wasn't like that. You attacked us first. The silence was almost unbearable, so Kara grasped the first thing that came to mind. Did you live in Sintra, the Katana capital? Rena shook her head. That battle was my first time in the capital. From what I heard about the way you fight, I would have thought you must be a part of the royal guard. The split second of pure hatred Rena shot her way made Kara's stomach drop. My father was, the Katana girl said. Then her eyes softened, and she gazed at the partially eaten food on the tray beside her. And both my brothers. They all died at Acreum. Then she lifted her head and stared defiantly at Kara again. Kara bit her lip. She couldn't help the guilt that overwhelmed her now, especially when she thought of the stories she'd heard about Acreum. Lord Krieger of archer culture and Lord Johann of knight culture combined their forces to obliterate the enemy warbands there. The prince, Rena said, finally breaking the silence. Kara met her gaze and nodded. How well do you know him? Kara was completely taken aback by the girl's astute assertion. We've been training together since I was old enough to ride a horse. Rena's stare made her feel as if the girl were prying into her soul. And you're fighting in this tournament too? Yes, Kara replied, amazed that the Katana girl had caught on to that. I was chosen to represent rider culture. It really is an honor, Rena. I was thrilled when the elders told me I was their first choice. Rena blinked before shaking her head with pity. You really want to marry him? Her words seemed to say, what is wrong with you? Kara's stomach clenched in irritation, but she reminded herself that this girl had lost her family and her home. She had to be patient and understanding. The conquerors have ruled for centuries, and the 8 cultures have experienced more peace than any of the people ever did when they ruled themselves. The same will be true for your people. The girl looked at Kara as if she were insipid, but didn't say anything else. Instead, she leaned back against the headboard and closed her eyes. I don't think I want to compete in your queen games. What? Kara was stunned. Why? I just don't. Good luck to yourself, but leave me out of it. Kara's mind was racing. She had never anticipated the girl's unwillingness to compete as a factor. There's great honor in becoming the next queen, Kara went on. For example, the queen pairs her king one son, his only heir, and it's her responsibility to raise that heir in the best way she sees fit, with her own morals, values, and beliefs that might actually improve life of her people when her son ascends the throne. Lady Eri was the victor of the last Queenmaker series. She was rider culture, so she and the king moved to the rider territory to rule. Whoever wins this series will rule from her own territory and collect tribute from the other 7 cultures until the next Queenmaker series. In that case, none of the other cultures who just invaded my home would ever let me win? You're right, they wouldn't, Kara blurted out. Rena stared at Kara as if clueless. So why would I compete? Because you couldn't win the Queen Games, but I could. With your help, I could. All Kara could hear was the sound of the wagon creaking over some rough grass. Ah, I see, Rena finally said, looking at her with a newfound appreciation. So that's why you're here in this wagon with me. You want me to fight for you. There didn't seem to be any point in lying. Yes, if you're as good as everyone says you are, you could help me win. Rena laughed. Her first real display of emotion was unsettling for Kara, but she tried not to show it. What do I get? What do you want? My people free from conqueror's rule? You could do that, right, as queen? No, Kara knew. She could not after all the blood spilt to acquire the new lands. It would split the empire in 2, and Katana culture had already depleted all its men and resources trying to resist the 8 cultures. It would be a fruitless venture with no prospect of succeeding except inciting an internal war. Choice time. A. Tell Rena the truth, that you can't realistically do that. B. Offer to try, but tell Rena that it is incredibly unlikely. C. Ask Rena for something else that you can do for her. D. Lie that you will find a way through your son to free her people.
Okay, so we are moving on to the third choice. And for this one, we might be changing this one because we think it'd be more interesting if there was a storyline with freeing Samurai's people instead of Kara actually try to lie about it to just, get that transaction and ally-ness. So I think it'd be more interesting if that actually could be a plot development. So stay tuned. On to choice 4.
I couldn't free your people from conqueror rule, Kara stated, but my son could, once he becomes king of the conquerors and the 8 cultures. I could raise him to believe the conquests were never justified and should be relinquished. Rena laughed, mockingly at Kara. What, and I have to take your word that you'll actually do that? Kara could say nothing, but then something floated into her head, and without thinking she asked, "Do you have any alternative?" The smile faded from Rena's face, and she said nothing. Kara didn't give her the chance to think of something witty to reply back with. If freeing your people is actually what you want, then it's not me who needs you, but the other way around. Your son couldn't. He would be king, Kara told her firmly. King, letting the word hang in the air. Rena turned her head away to stare up at the ceiling, and Kara genuinely couldn't tell if Rena had even believed her. Let me think about it. I'll decide once we arrive. When they reached their destination, so close to the provincial palace, Kara was only too thrilled to get off the wagon. Though she probably tried to hide it, Rena looked almost as relieved as well. A contingent of rider culture guards had come out to meet them, and with them they brought Kara's horse, Sasha, who had injured herself early on during her long ride east. Kara had ridden a different mount to reach the Katana girl, but arranged for Sasha to be taken care of and brought back to her on the return journey. The sight of Sasha, saddled and bridled and grazing on the salty grasses, filled her with more joy than she thought possible. Kara forgot about Rena in that moment and the responsibility the prince had set on her shoulders. She sprinted across and out toward her horse. Sasha looked up, her thick neck knocking into the guard holding her just before Kara was upon them. Sasha whickered and tossed her head, and Kara reached up to run her hands over the mare's soft, warm muzzle. "You better have been good while I was away," she muttered, smirking at the horse and pressing her forehead against Sasha's mane. The mare turned to ruffle Kara's hair with huge, soft lips, snorting against her, and Kara couldn't hold back a little chuckle. "Is she all better?" she asked the guard holding Sasha's reins, who handed them quickly to her. He nodded. When Kara turned to introduce her horse to Rena, though, her excitement dimmed a little. The Katana woman stood sullenly. Rena stood rigidly, with her hands by her sides, and eyed the rider culture guards casting unsubtle, scathing glances her way. Kara turned toward the guard who'd led Sasha and asked, "Did you bring any extra horses?" The man turned his head to look down at her. "Only the pack horses. We had not known you'd be returning with a prisoner." Kara frowned at him. "Have any of them been broken to ride?" The guard tilted his head. "One, but he's only had about a year under the saddle. Whatever you'd planned for him to haul, put it in the carriage. I don't plan to sit upon wheels with Sasha here, and the 2 of us need to leave right away." "Yes, my lady." The guard offered a half-hearted bow and stepped aside. "I'll saddle him for you now." "Thank you." Then Kara led her horse back toward the wagon and her ward. "Rena," she called, her voice carrying with a little more cheeriness than befit the situation. Rena turned her head sharply to meet Kara's gaze, and the rider culture guards dispersed at her approach. "Have you ever ridden a horse?" Rena eyed Sasha's mare with a scowl. "This one looks old." Kara stopped and blinked at the woman. "Not too old," she said, turning to scratch Sasha's broad cheek just below her ear. "You do know how to ride a horse, don't you?" Rena looked back at her and tilted her head. "Of course I do." "Good," Kara grinned. "Then you should have no problem keeping up." Rather than ask, Kara knew better now that the best way to get the Katana girl to do something was to attack her pride.
Hey guys, sorry, we had some production issues, so we're just going to cut to Kara and Samurai arriving at the provincial palace, and Samurai revealing her name is actually Riko. Hope you guys are enjoying the story so far. Okay, bye!
"Well, have you decided on whether we're going to work together or not?" "Oh yeah, of course. I would have taken that horse and made a run for it once we were out of sight of the guards otherwise. No, I think I can be your accomplice, even though I don't believe you can do what you say." "I can," Kara snapped back, still feeling betrayed over the change in identity and placing a hand on the door handle. "I guess we'll find out, Ryder," she said, putting her hand on Kara's and taking it off the door handle, "which is why these are my terms for us working together. Firstly, I want to get to know the prince. You'll introduce us so I can decide if we can really trust his son to do what you say. Second, I get to decide who we ally with. What do you mean? Kara asked. Well, there's 7 other girls in there, and I'm sure we're going to need more than just the 2 of us to win. So, when the time comes, I will decide who we ally with, not you. Are we in agreement? Choice time. A. Agree to Reiko's requests. B. Agree to Reiko's request, but don't get her to know the prince. C. Request that you both have to agree on who to ally with. D. Disagree to Reiko's request, and you decide who to ally with.
Hey guys, so now we're on choice 4. So for this one, we really like this one too. Great choice. I think it's great to get Kara to have more agency, especially with like decisions that she and Samurai are making. This is an ally. We really don't want her to be taken as a backseat character, because she is the main character. So letting her have a choice and all that, I think, is terrific. So great choice, guys. Can't wait to see what the rest of this races down the line will be.
Well done.
Yay!
Kara thought about it, but then ultimately decided not to accept Riko's request, and instead replied with, no, we both have to agree on who we should ally with. Otherwise, we can't be allies. Riko blinked at her, waiting. Fine. She reached out her hand and the 2 shook on it. Good. Are you ready? With a nod from Riko, Kara pushed the huge heavy door inward, and they stepped together into the provincial palace. The massive domed ceiling of the entrance hall stretched impossibly high above them. The marble floors lit up by the sunlight flooding through the windows on the northeastern wall. Banners of gold streamed from the coffered ceilings, and others boasting the rider culture sigil of the black stallion on yellow silk adorned the smooth, plastered walls. A wide marble staircase stretched half the width of the far wall, blanketed with a golden handrail falling down its center. And between the new arrivals and that staircase, lounging in chairs and on benches at the table in the center of the room, were the other 7 champions. Finally, we were starting to think you'd lost your way. Kara had never met the silver-haired woman before, but she knew from the blue of her clothes alone that this champion was Lancer. Not in my own territory, she replied, forcing a smile. She didn't want to start a quarrel with anyone, but she also didn't want the other champions thinking she was a pushover. It didn't matter that her stomach clenched with nerves to see all 7 of her competitors waiting for them. We traveled far to be here, and in short time. Lancer held Kara's gaze for a moment, then grinned. No doubt. She clapped her hands together. Now we can make our groups. Not the traditional pairings, because of Samari over there. Our groupings? Riko's voice echoed over the marble floors. Most of the other champions chuckled at her surprise. However, the woman with blonde hair and an embroidered gray outfit did not. She'd been leaning her hip against the table since Kara and Riko arrived, and now she straightened her posture. By her colors, Kara pegged her as Knight. You saw the 4 towers, Knight said, her brow set almost as starkly as Riko's. The prince has assigned himself to the South Tower. The other 3 are for us. 3 of us will be sleeping in each tower, instead of the usual 2 per tower, Lancer added. Kara had not expected this change, but it made sense. It was usually a pair of contending queens assigned to each tower, but with 9, the numbers don't add up. Knight glanced at her from the corner of her eye, but didn't turn her head. So, we need to decide who sleeps in which tower. Riko stared out at all of them and blinked once. I'd rather remain with Ryder. All eyes turned to Kara, who was just grateful Riko had remembered not to use her name. As long as Ryder agrees, Knight replied, her blonde hair glinting in the sunlight when she tilted her head at Kara. Kara turned to meet Riko's gaze and nodded. Of course. Lancer turned around to address the other queens at the table. Who wants to be their 3rd? The room grew incredibly quiet when no one answered, and the silver-haired queen's laughter rang out across the marble. Well then, does anyone else have any preferences? The queen sitting at the far end of the table with wild, flaming red hair and wearing a simple dress of emerald green, which signaled her as warrior, looked up. Don't put me with Knight. Knight briefly turned to glance at her, then looked away again with flared nostrils. I'm sure no one's going to argue with you on that point, she said dryly. Lancer studied them both, then waved a dismissive hand. Ocean, Saber, do you mind sharing a tower? The woman with reddish blonde hair braided into a crown around her head wore the burnt orange of ocean culture, her brown leather boots stained with salt and stretching up to the middle of her calves. Though Kara never spent much time admiring other girls' appearances, she didn't think she'd ever seen someone as absolutely gorgeous as Ocean. Kara wondered if this queen had ever received a scar or so much as a bruise from training to make it into the Queenmaker series. Ocean turned with wide eyes to look at the queen sitting at the center of the table. Saber was the only one of them almost half naked, her belly exposed between the violet top with thin straps over her shoulders and the loose, airy pants. "Why do I get her?" Ocean said, scowling at Lancer. Saber straightened and rolled her eyes, then swept her long black hair away from her forehead. Ocean sighed. Better than getting samurai, I suppose. "It's katana," Kara interrupted, "not samurai." Ocean shook her head. The king has designated her people as samurai culture. But that's not their name. Ocean shrugged. The king has already declared it in his letters to the 8 cultures, so that's what we're going to call her. Kara glanced at Rico, who reacted to the misnomer as much as she did to just about everything else, which was not at all. But Kara sensed underneath she was irked. "So," Lancer waved a hand at Ocean. "You, Saber, and Warrior. You'll be the East Tower Alliance. Now, who wants Assassin?" Assassin was draped head to toe in tight-fitting black. Iron loops ran in 2 glinting rows down her black leather vest, which made the copper haircut just above her shoulders look like it was on fire. The Black Queen stared at the table and didn't meet anyone's gaze. "You can't be serious," Lancer said, eyeing the other queens when no one spoke up. "Fine. Assassin, do you agree to an alliance with me?" Assassin glanced at her with still brown eyes, nodded once, then stared at the table again. "Knight?" "That's fine," Knight replied. "Good. We're the North Tower." "Wait." The woman with short cropped brown hair and red leather looked up from where she sat at the table, her eyes suddenly wide. "I'm left with Rider and Samurai then?" "Were you not paying attention, Archer?" Warrior asked, lifting a hand to indicate their entire gathering. Archer glowered. "I don't want to be with the dead girl." Lancer tilted her head. "You had plenty of time to say something." When she was finished glaring at Lancer, Archer turned her attention to the other queens. "Will anyone trade with me?" Lancer put a hand on her hip in annoyance, and most of the other queens stared at Archer and said nothing. Assassin didn't look up from her intense concentration on the table. Archer let out a loud growl that sounded rather like a feral animal, then folded her arms and sat back against her chair. "That's it then." Lancer stepped across the entrance hall toward one of the recessed niches, where she pulled out a wooden tray with 9 stones painted in different colors. When she set this on the table, Kara and Rico approached. 4 circles had been painted on the tray, which apparently stood for the 4 towers of the provincial palace. Lancer moved each colored stone to their corresponding circles on the tray. Black, blue, and gray in the North Tower, orange, green, and purple in the East Tower, and red, gold, and white in the West Tower. "White?" Rico muttered. "I'm assuming it was chosen for you, for your people," Kara replied under her breath. "I was told the guards would be bringing our things up to the rooms once we had everything decided," Lancer said, clasping her hands in front of herself. "The opening ceremony is tonight after sunset at the ringing of the bell. The rest of the day is for us to use as we wish." For a moment, the entrance hall was quiet, and no one moved. Then Lancer raised her eyebrows and took off toward the main staircase at the far end of the hall to go wherever it was she was headed. The queens slowly dispersed, Ocean and Warrior muttering to each other as they headed in another direction. Kara wondered how many of them thought it odd to be left to themselves in this sprawling building, though it felt no different to her than her life in the royal palace. There weren't any conqueror guards to be seen from where they stood, but she imagined they'd make their presence known only when they were needed. Kara turned to Rico, who raised her eyebrow and watched Assassin walk off alone. "Care for a tour?" Rico shrugged, but she moved beside Kara as they headed off to explore. Kara had visited the provincial palace a handful of times when she was younger, during the days when she and the prince longed for adventure and mystery and sought it everywhere they could. Back then, the place had been empty, undecorated, cleared of anything that might provide a spark for their imaginations. Now, it almost felt like she'd never been here before. She led Rico across the massive entrance hall to the room opposite the main staircase, where they found the domed ceiling of the dining hall. Presumably, from what Corbel had told her, the contending queens would be gathering here tonight to dine together for the opening ceremony, where the first round of matches would be revealed. Just off the north end of the dining hall were the massive arrangement of training rooms. The last time Kara had seen these, they'd been empty, the weapons racks barren. That had only disappointed her in the prince. For the Queenmaker series, though, the pine floors had been sanded and shined, and a vast array of weaponry filled the wooden racks lining the walls. Mostly wooden sparring swords and staffs, but also longbows, sabers, spears, 2 claymores, a selection of broadswords, rapiers, a long trident, a highly glistening collection of short and long daggers, 4 glinting scythes, and a few things Kara had never seen before. The 2 girls inspected the rather eclectic selection, but when Riko sighed, Kara realized that a katana had not been provided among the weaponry. She hoped Korbel would find suitable arms for Riko in the coming days. They made their way through the palace, most of which had been constructed of stone and plaster. The marble only existed outside, in the entrance hall and in the dining hall. When they'd gone through the south end, they found themselves returning through the entrance hall to then head up the grand staircase at the north end. The polished wooden banister was cold and sleek beneath Kara's fingers as they ascended, but her focus was pulled away by echoing footsteps headed toward them. From the hallway to the left of the staircase came Ocean, her sea-worn boots whispering across the marble floors. She stopped when she saw Riko and Kara. Then a smile broke over her face. "Enjoying the palace, are you?" she asked. "The rooms are nice, at least in the East Tower." "Where are Saber and Warrior?" Kara asked. Ocean glanced at the ceiling and shrugged with one shoulder. "Saber's praying, Warrior's training." The Orange Queen rolled her eyes and smirked, as if all this were a big joke and only she was in on it. Kara and Riko reached the landing at the top of the stairs, and Ocean to them. She stopped surprisingly close in front of Riko, then reached out to pinch a lock of her straight black hair, rubbing it between her fingers. "Your people really got put in their place after attacking us," Ocean said. Riko glared at the Orange Queen and slapped Ocean's hand aside. The seafaring girl gently lowered her hand, studying Riko with wide eyes, then chuckled. "Don't start trouble," Kara said, worrying what Riko might do if she were further provoked. "Why not?" Ocean replied, still studying Riko's face without an ounce of tact. "They started it." Then she finally looked at Kara. "Have either of you met the prince yet? Rumor has it he's quite the monster." That ignited a flare of protective anger inside Kara. Who would say something like that about the prince? "I hope you know the difference between truth and rumor," she replied stiffly. "The prince is not a monster." "Really?" Ocean grinned. "I heard he takes very much after his father." Kara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself against what she wished to do, which was to reach out and shove Ocean down the marble staircase. Instead, she offered a thin smile and shook her head. None of the other queens but Riko knew who she was, or that she'd spent over a decade living with the prince. None of them could be allowed to find that out. "Well, I'm sure I'll find out soon enough when he's my husband. See you at dinner." Ocean dipped her golden head at them and all but skipped down the grand staircase. Kara stared after her, hating the fact that the simple mention of such a rumor could enrage her so much. When Riko stepped beside her to peer beyond the staircase, the movement jolted Kara out of her ferocious glare. "That one's going to end up dead in her sleep." Kara blinked and turned to look at Riko. "She'll be safe while under these roofs. Those are the rules." Riko snorted. "I don't imagine any of these girls take the rules here seriously." "Of course they do," Kara replied. "The punishment for breaking the rules while here is death. No one will harm Ocean while she sleeps. Contending queens are only allowed to harm each other in the arena or training rooms. Anywhere else is forbidden." "Have there been murders in the past?" "Yes, but the perpetrator is always caught." Riko blew air out of her nose. "When there is a murder, someone is always blamed," Riko said casually. "But I'd wager the true culprit is the one who ends up with a crown on her head." For a moment, Kara was speechless. It surprised her that Riko would think every Eurasian queen took the throne with blood on her hands. Then her stomach squirmed into tight knots when it occurred to her that some within Eurasia had most likely held the same sentiment toward her mentor Queen Eri when she had taken the throne. But it didn't matter what anyone thought. Riko would soon see for herself how the Queenmaker series functioned. Swallowing, Kara led Riko to look down into the arena. It was a huge, round dome, surrounded by massive columns with no ceiling to speak of, except an open sky. Behind these columns were rows of curving benches for the spectators, with a raised platform at the back where she assumed the prince and the king would sit to watch. Most likely Queen Eri as well. Golden banners streamed from the column. "Everything looks so different," she said, her voice slipping down into the arena. The Ryder Provincial Palace hasn't been used in... She turned to Riko, but the katana girl had already left her side, seemingly uninterested in the history of this place. With a sigh, Kara took a final look at the arena where they would eventually be fighting each other, and followed Riko across the hall. They climbed the staircase to the west tower, which was dimly lit with sparse round bowl oil lamps. The tower opened up into their bedchamber at the top. The circular room was large and richly decorated. 2 side tables and a chest of drawers rested between 2 fully furnished beds, and beside the chamber door rested a 3rd bed. Apparently, the west tower had been prepared only for 2 occupants until quite recently, being from the other 2 beds 4 posters and canopy frames. When they stepped inside, Archer turned from where she'd been staring out the far window. She glanced at Kara, didn't look at Riko, and nodded toward the 3 chests waiting beside the recently installed 3rd bed. I only just came up. Our trunks were already here. Kara recognized hers immediately. A deep chestnut chest with a gold stallion and filigree carved into the hinged lid. One of you will be sleeping in the low bed, said the Red Queen, and Kara turned around to see Riko, who'd headed for one of the soft raised canopy beds. Samurai should take it, Archer added, her nostrils flaring as she glared at Riko. Riko blinked, and her lip curled up into a half sneer of disdain. Why? Samurai isn't even an official culture of the Eurasia. That's why, Archer replied. Not yet, Kara intervened. Archer didn't stop glaring at Riko. She's not even supposed to be here. No emotion at all passed over Riko's face, but she didn't turn away from Archer's gaze. That has nothing to do with where I sleep. Kara glanced from one of them to the other, anticipating a violent confrontation, and said, I'll take it. That seemed to diffuse the brewing tension. Kara grabbed the iron handle on her chest and dragged it across the doorway toward the low 3rd bed. Grimacing, Archer came to retrieve her chest as well, which was intricately carved with a detailed panel of wildlife and a howling wolf's head at its center. When she'd dragged it all the way and stormed from their shared chambers, Kara watched the empty doorway for a moment, already quite fed up with all the animosity being directed at Riko. She hoped, at the very least, that Archer's resistance would soften sooner rather than later. She turned to Riko, who sat at the edge of her canopy bed, and stared at the 3rd chest the guards had brought up to the west tower. Kara nodded at it. That one's yours. Riko's brows creased just a little. No, it's not. With a sigh, Kara rose and went to the 3rd chest. It was quite obviously recently made. The light ash wood sanded smooth, but still with that grainy texture of new carpentry. It had no embellishment at all, but decoration was the least of Riko's concerns. Kara lifted the lid to peer inside and found her suspicion confirmed. Rolls of glistening silk, velvet, and ivory piled on top of each other, all in various shades of white and cream. She slipped her fingers under the notched handle in the chest's side and dragged it towards Riko's bed. This is definitely yours. Katana culture's color is white, and you'll be the first to show Eurasia what that looks like. Riko stared at the chest when Kara stood, then blinked up at the door the Red Queen left through. Archer isn't wrong, she said, her voice falling flat. I shouldn't be here. Kara tilted her head. Through their days of travel across Ryder territory, she'd thought Riko had set aside her reluctance to what was now a certainty for the very near future. That the Conqueror King had claimed and would rule Katana territory as part of the Eurasian Empire, bringing all its people under his reign. Now, though, the other girl's resistance was starting to sound a lot more like self-pity, and Kara didn't think she'd ever seen someone who wore that emotion as poorly as Riko did. You're the 9th contending queen, she repeated, and your place is here now. You'll see. She turned away from Riko's bed, then paused. Don't listen to Archer. After tonight, she'll come to regret what she said. Riko frowned at her. Why? Kara realized that she hadn't fully explained what these pairings or groups really entailed. Mostly because Kara had assumed her and Riko would have been paired at the start. The groups we decided today are for more than just who shares a room in which tower. We're meant to eat together, train together, travel through the palace together. If something were to happen to Archer, like if she were attacked, we would be responsible for protecting her. And if we don't, or weren't present when the attack took place, we would be blamed for letting it happen. So we have to watch over her at all times, and she needs to watch over us. Those are the rules. Closing her eyes, Riko lifted her feet onto the bed to lie down, her arms straight by her side as if she were meditating. Kara shook her head, waiting for Riko to say something more, but she received only silence. I'm going to the hot baths, she said. Properly wash off the journey. Care to join me? A deep sigh that sounded almost like a growl rose from Riko, but she didn't move or open her eyes. No, I wish to enjoy some alone time before that, too, is taken from me. Kara thought Riko's brooding rather dramatic, but if the Katana girl wanted solitude, she could have it. It would be scarce after the opening ceremony. With a shrug, Kara turned and stepped through the tower doors to head for the baths in the southern end of the palace. The baths had also lain empty and dormant every other time Kara had explored the provincial palace as a kid. The minute she opened the large swinging door into the bathhouse, she was only too glad that Corbel and the royal palace staff had returned this place to its former glory. She stepped into a wall of steam wearing a gold bathing gown made of wool, unable at first to see anything but a thick whiteness. She then moved slowly forward, not wanting to stumble on anything, and the steam thinned just enough to see. The bathhouse held a round arrangement of 10 smaller baths, suitable for 1 or 2 people, which formed a ring around one massive central pool. In the middle of this, a giant white fountain in the shape of a rearing stallion threw what could only have been more heated water into the air. The roar of the fountain drowned out everything else, which almost made it seem as if the steam filling the enormous room were hissing at her. It had been easy to ignore the dirt and sweat when she was riding, but now she was only too glad to be rid of it. Kara moved to the closest bath, smiling at the heat of the wooden floorboards under her feet, warmed by both the hot air and heated water produced by the palace's underground hypocrost. The water felt just a little too hot when she slowly dipped her toes in at the edge of the small pool, but it was just right for soothing her tight muscles. Kara slipped into the steaming waters, sat upon the bench built into the bath, and leaned her head back against the edge of the pool. The continuous rush of the fountain took nearly all thoughts from her mind as she let herself melt into the water. Some of the steam cleared enough to reveal most of the baths around her, not hidden by the fountain. Then, the center of the pool beside her erupted, and a woman emerged from beneath the surface. She flung her hair back to send thick sprays of water across the bathhouse floor. The shock made Kara nearly slip, but she grasped the edge of the pool and righted herself. The woman turned toward her, grinned, and folded her arms over the edge of the pool to gaze at Kara. "Well, hello there," Lancer said with a small laugh. "You startled me," Kara replied, finding herself laughing a little at her own jumpiness too. "Did I?" Lancer tilted her head. "Good to know." Kara shook her head and lifted her arms from the water to prop them both along the edge of the pool behind her. "I thought I was the only one in here," she replied. Lancer hummed, then dipped in the pool to wet her hair again and slick it back from her face. They were silent for a moment, and Kara reached out toward the tray of rough, neatly rolled cloths beside her own pool. She grabbed one and scrubbed slowly at her skin, enjoying the sting of it under the hot water. "When did you hear that you'd been chosen to represent Lancer culture?" she asked, looking up briefly from where she pulled the cloth over her arm. Lancer smiled at her. "I was fighting in samurai territory when I found out. It was quite the shock." "Were you excited?" For a moment, Lancer merely studied her. When I finally accepted that I'd been chosen and what it meant, I was quite excited. "And you?" Kara set the cloth on the edge of the bath and pushed her way through the water toward Lancer, where she mirrored the Blue Queen's position and folded her arms at the pool's edge. "It was the best day of my life." Lancer tilted her head again. "I'm sure. Tell me, Ryder, you came to the provincial palace with Samurai. Do you know her well?" "A little." Kara liked to feel she did, but she suspected that Riko was the kind of person you could never truly know. "So, who do you suppose she'll align herself with in all of this?" Lancer asked, her eyes widening with intrigue. "The Sabers or the Assassins, if you had to guess?" Kara froze. "What are you talking about?" It came out as a choked whisper. "Oh, don't worry," Lancer said, then nodded toward the center of the bathhouse. "That fountain's so loud we can speak as freely as we wish in here. No one can hear us. Tell me, who are you planning to ally yourself with?" Realizing the Blue Queen had mistaken her confusion for caution at being overheard, Kara found herself no longer enjoying the bath. "I have to get ready for dinner," she said hastily, then stood from the pool and walked toward the exit. Her wet feet slapped against the warm floor. "I heard Assassin's father had the official list of scheduled matches for the entire Queenmaker series months ago," Lancer called behind her. Kara had reached the door and should have known better than to rise to the bait, but she couldn't help it. So what? Assassin culture have informants everywhere. The scheduled matches included a 9th contending queen before even the prince announced there would be one. Kara pushed open the bathhouse door and stormed through it, pretending she hadn't heard Lancer's conniving tone above the roar of the fountain. A month before? Kara thought about it to herself. Well, it's probably just the king wanted to include katana culture and made preparations ahead of time. That's it. When Kara stepped back into her shared chambers at the top of the West Tower, Archer had just finished tying the stays on her slimming red velvet gown. The Red Queen moved to the mirror to smooth down the wayward pieces of her short hair. Rico lay slouched on her bed with seemingly no interest in her appearance. "Aren't you going to get ready?" Kara asked. "We have the opening ceremony tonight, and it'll be your first opportunity to meet the prince." The katana girl did not reply. Kara decided to write off her strange behavior with a shake of the head, which reminded the rider contending queen to open her own trunk and dig inside for her evening wear. Queen Eri had made a stunning wool dress of pale yellow for Kara to wear to impress her son, and Kara was delighted to see it neatly folded at the top of her trunk of clothes. It took longer than she would have thought to put it on, that even the bell rung for the opening ceremony, and she was still not ready to leave. However, the garment fit her perfectly, drawn tight around her waist with the accompanying sash, while the loose arms draped from her wrists. When she'd finished adjusting it, she found Rico sitting up in her bed and staring at her. Kara opened her arms, silently asking the katana woman what she thought of the ensemble, but Rico only closed her eyes with a sigh, as if Kara now wore the garment all wrong. "Have you decided what you're wearing?" she asked. Rico slowly lowered herself back on the bed to resume the same lying position. "Those things in that trunk are not mine." It was true, of course. Kara and the 7 other contending queens had been given plenty of time to prepare their own trunks with what they'd need during the tournament. Rico, though, had been spirited away from her home with nothing more than the armor she'd worn into battle, not even her own sword. "I know," Kara replied, trying to sound both sympathetic and encouraging. "But these were made for you. You can't be expected to wear the same." "I'll wear what I want," Rico interrupted. "Suit yourself." Kara waited, hoping the katana woman would relent and dress in whatever formal gown was stashed in her trunk. But Rico didn't move. "If you really don't want to come, then just stay here," Kara said, then went to the standing bronze mirror to repin the stray locks of her raven hair. Then she turned toward Archer, who'd been silently watching them both. "Are you ready?" Archer nodded. "We'll see you in the dining hall," she told Rico, and the red and yellow contending queens left the West Tower chambers. With the exception of Rico, Kara and Archer were the last queens to enter the dining hall, where everyone else had already taken their seats, including the prince. Kara paused when she saw him. He looked somehow different from when she last saw him. When the prince looked up from the table and saw her, a wide grin spread across his face. His eyes lit up, and he stood. "Ryder," he said, his voice ringing with obvious pleasure. "We've been waiting for you." Then he gestured to the empty seat to his left, where he sat at the head of the table. That smile washed her surprise completely away, and she beamed back with a nod. "My prince." She had not thought she'd be this happy to see him again after her travels. But here was the boy she knew, and the man she meant to stand beside as his queen. Archer slipped silently into the closest empty seat, and Kara approached the head of the table, keeping the prince's gaze all the while, then waited for her to take her seat before he sat in his own. The prince's smiling gaze did not leave her right away, and Kara found her heart racing. When the prince finally looked away to gaze at the 8 assembled queens at the mahogany table, Kara glanced at Lancer and the rest, and suddenly realized they had all been watching. Kara's smile faded as she considered the other girls. Some of them still eyed her blatantly, others avoided her gaze, but all had clearly picked up on the prince's treatment of her. They'd all donned fine gowns, rearranged their hair, and offered the prince sweet smiles, but he had ignored them all in favor of Kara. The tension in the room was suddenly very palpable. "Isn't Katana in the West Tower with you?" the prince asked her. Kara nodded. "Where is she?" "She'll come later," Kara hoped. And that she did, halfway through the night after the main course of food had been eaten, and each queen had spoken in turn with the prince. Soft footsteps echoed from the entrance into the dining hall as Lancer was regaling them with stories of snow bears. Everyone turned to see Rico walking slowly toward the thick dining table, looking entirely like she'd just stumbled out of a gutter compared to the other girls at the table. Rico was barefoot, her long legs uncovered beneath a tattered white shift. Whatever the shift used to be, it was clearly meant to be worn under something else. The hem had been ripped on one side, exposed her lower ribs, and whatever Rico had done to it, Kara could not bring herself to believe that anyone would dare pack such a spoiled article in a contending queen's trunk. But the girl herself walked proudly, as if she'd donned the finest gown of all the queens, and stopped at the opposite end of the table. The dining hall fell completely silent until the prince said, "I thought clothes had been prepared for you. My apologies." He genuinely sounded apologetic. "No, this is what I chose to wear," Rico replied. The samurai girl held his gaze and did not look away, her confidence unwavering. "You took everything of value from my country," she said, the echo of her voice across the heavy stone floors thickening her accent. "This is all that remains, my prince." The prince said nothing and merely gestured toward the remaining empty seat at the table, which was the farthest of them all from the prince. Without another word or show of recognition, Rico stepped forward and gracefully took her seat. Kara couldn't stop staring at the katana girl. Somehow she looked the most eye-catching of them all. 3 conqueror guards filtered into the dining hall from the kitchens in the back, 2 of them carrying trays of huge iron chalices. The third brought a silver pitcher, and when all the chalices had been set in front of the prince and the contending queens, the wine was poured. Most hands immediately went to grasp the chalices and start drinking, likely to help diffuse the tension of which only the prince himself seemed ignorant. Either that, Kara thought, or the prince just didn't care. Rico, however, watched the prince like a predator does to a prey, her finger stroking the edge of her chalice. Kara picked up her own chalice and took a long drink. The prince downed his chalice in one long, steady drink, after which it was immediately refilled by the guard. The prince dabbed at his lips with a napkin and said he wanted the queens he had not already met, which was only Rico, to introduce themselves. But instead of introducing herself for their sake, which Kara never really expected Rico to do, the 9th queen looked at the prince and asked, "Why do you keep the girls battling to be your queen under the same roof?" The prince lowered his cup, and the corner of his mouth twitched into a smile. The first Conqueror King's wife had no advisors when she won the tournament to become his wife. Her words were her own, and since then, that has been our tradition. I do not want a queen who could only impress me by repeating the words she was told to speak. Each of you will be judged on your own merit and nothing else. He took another long drink of wine, but didn't drain it this time. Unlike traditional unions, a conqueror union is a marriage till death, which means separation is a right not given to us. "So you only want a queen who wins on her own merit?" asked Rico. "Correct," the prince answered. "You didn't really answer my question, though. Why under the same roof? You view outside help as cheating. But what if your future queen cheated to become your wife?" Rico asked, unabashedly challenging the prince. "Suppose Ryder stood in my way to becoming queen. What would stop me then from breaking her legs or doing something worse in the middle of the night?" Kara stared at her in shock. The prince closed his mouth, looking both unimpressed and unamused by Rico's question. "Me and the captain of my guards. The groups you formed today are to keep you accountable to each other, and to provide alibis. If a crime is committed, anyone without an alibi will be found guilty and punished accordingly." The words came from his lips with incredible ease. However, Rico was satisfied by none of it. What about secret alliances? More than one queen collaborating or working in secret to eliminate the most likely winner? What if we all lie and provide you with false alibis? "If I suspect any of this," the prince replied grimly, "I punish all those I suspect of lying. And if you're wrong, and the culprit is not among those you suspect, instead the person you punish was just framed because they were the most likely to win and become your queen, what happens then?" The dining hall fell painfully silent again as Rico and the prince stared at each other. Ocean let out a chuckle, and most of the contending queens seemed to find this all very amusing. Kara didn't see the humor in this exchange. The prince downed the rest of his chalice and said, "If you fool me and my guards, congratulations. You've won the right to sit at my side as queen." "Ah," Rico replied, suddenly looking at the prince with newfound appeal. "Your rules aren't in place to prevent cheating or to protect us. They're in place to see if we can get away with cheating without getting caught." The prince smirked. "There are no rules to being queen. Why should there be any to becoming one?" Kara could not believe those words had just left the prince's mouth. They were so against everything she knew about him as a person. Finally, Riko touched her chalice and took a slow, delicate sip. "I think I'll like this tournament," she replied, and finally tore her gaze away from the prince as if she were no longer interested in him now that he had answered her questions. "Do know," the prince added, his gaze lingering on Riko for a moment before he glanced at the other queens, "that if you disobey these rules to further your own gain, if you conspire, attempt to place the blame or physically assault one of the other queens, and if you are caught, a swift death is the best you can hope for." "Can we be done with this charade?" Assassin interjected. "Yes, of course," replied the prince. "I appreciate your patience. Let's announce the matches. However, before we do, just know I expect my future queen to be courteous and respectful at all times, even when in the company of enemies. Should she find herself unable to do so, she has no business being at my side. As you've all demonstrated tonight, civility is not impossible among you. It will remain this way. Treachery and deception will not be tolerated." Though he did not say more on the subject, Kara heard in her own mind the echo of his voice and what he seemed to imply. Treachery and deception will not be tolerated if you are caught. Then the prince sat again. "Bring out the set matches," he called toward the training rooms. To Kara's surprise, Steward Corbel emerged at the east end of the dining hall, dragging a large wooden plaque nearly the same size as himself. Then he lifted the golden banner covering the plaque's surface to reveal the matches for the first round of the Queenmaker series. Wooden slats had been painted with the colors of each culture and arranged in order, leaving little room for confusion. Lancer and Riko would face each other in the opening match, followed by Kara and Warrior, Knight and Ocean, then Saber against Assassin. Archer viewed the plaque, saw her name alone at the bottom, and slumped into her chair. Kara looked at Riko, wondering how the Katana girl might react to being selected for the first match. She found the girl in white staring across the table at Lancer, and when Kara turned to follow her gaze, she saw Lancer winking with the ghost of a smile. Once they were dismissed from the dining hall and the prince's presence, the queens returned to their towers. Archer didn't say a word as she traded her red gown for a chemise and slipped into her bed, loosening the ties on the veils of her bed curtains along the canopy frame for as much privacy as any of them would find from now on. "What do you think of Lancer?" Kara asked Riko as she changed out of her dress, folding it neatly back into her trunk. "I'll have a better idea when I fight her," Riko replied, sitting on her own bed but not moving to change out of the ragged shift she'd worn to dinner. "I'd be careful around her." Kara slipped a nightgown over her head and pulled her hair out from beneath its collar. "I feel like she's the kind who might try to cheat and could get away with it." She looked at Riko again, who stared at the floor from the edge of her bed. After crawling beneath the quilts of her own low bed, Kara gazed up into the darkness of the West Tower and wondered how long it would take her to fall asleep. "I understand now." Riko's voice lifted from the silence. Kara propped herself up to look toward Riko's bed, where she could barely make out the outline of the samurai lying there in that same corpse-like pose. Archer didn't stir. Understand what? Why the other girls call me Dead Girl. Everyone here would rather see me dead than sitting on the throne. Kara blinked against the darkness and couldn't help but sigh. "Don't worry. You're safe here under the prince's protection." "No, I'm really not," Riko replied, her voice soft now, but no less assured. "But I could help decide who wins this tournament." The next morning, Kara and Riko decided to practice for Katana's upcoming match against Lancer using wooden practice swords. The blunted blades cracked against each other as Kara set herself firmly in a defensive position and parried Riko's overhead strike. The Katana girl smirked and leaned toward her, pressing down into Kara's sword with her own until Kara finally managed to shove her away. "I should probably tell you what to expect in your match against Lancer," she said. "I don't see anyone else volunteering." The samurai ducked Kara's swing, then deflected Kara's next lunge and stepped back. "It's going to be slightly complicated, but I think you'll get it." Kara grunted when Riko feinted left, then swung low for an upward attack with her wooden blade. She sidestepped the blow, then pivoted just enough to avoid Riko's weapon, which probably would have sliced through her sparring tunic if it had been steel instead, then brought her own weapon across with a double-gripped swing. She would have struck the samurai hard, but Riko moved quickly enough to step aside and parry the blow. Their weapons cracked again, over and over, until finally they reached a wordless agreement to stand down for a moment. Kara wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand and laughed. "What should I expect?" Rico asked, looking down at her practice sword in disgust. "This first match is Lancer's choice." Kara turned to replace the sword upon the weapons rack. "She'll decide where you two fight." "In the palace arena?" Rico replied. "That stadium you showed off to me yesterday?" "Perhaps," Kara shrugged. "She's more likely to choose the Lancer territory arena. Every culture has a domed arena of their own outside the palace grounds. Lancer can choose to fight you there or in the palace arena. If she fights you in her territory arena and wins, the victory gets her 1 point." Rico returned the practice sword to the rack below Kara's. "I imagine she'll fight me where she's strongest." "Exactly." Kara watched the samurai step slowly down the rows of weaponry along the training room's walls. "But if she chooses to fight you in the palace arena, it's neutral, without a particular terrain advantage for either of you. But a victory there is worth 2 points." "For both of us?" Kara nodded. Rico pulled a rapier from the rack, which Kara hadn't seen hidden behind the broadswords. Then both women turned at the sound of footsteps entering the training room. Warrior stood there. "I thought I heard you sparring in here," she said. "We were," Kara replied. Now that the tournament had officially begun with the opening ceremony the night before, the queens were expected to be with their alliance members unless inside their own tower. Warrior had arrived alone, and with her looming match against Kara known to all, the tension between them heightened. Warrior turned to Rico, who held the rapier now as if she intended to use it. "Samurai," she said by way of greeting. "I wanted to speak with you yesterday alone, but you have quite the persistent shadow." Kara took that to mean herself. "What about?" inquired Rico. "Nothing serious. It's just, I fought in the war," the green-clad queen said, her wild red hair draped across her shoulders when she nodded at Rico. "You had a reputation even then. You slew over 50 Eurasian soldiers before being captured. It's sad that they only ever let the women fight when it's too late." With a flick of her wrist, Rico brought the point of the rapier up to aim it at Warrior's throat. Though they stood half a room apart, the very air seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. It was never too late. The samurai lowered the rapier in her hand and returned it to the weapons rack. "Now you fight to become queen of the very people who failed to kill you." Warrior's smile dimmed, and she nodded again at Rico before turning to Kara. "I'm looking forward to our first match, Ryder. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask for the smallest hint as to where we'll be fighting." Kara found herself chuckling at Warrior's audacity. Warrior offered her a tight-lipped smile, though her eyes shone with amusement. "I'll take that as a polite no." "I'd hate to rob you of the surprise," Kara said, "but you can at least expect a horse." This time, Warrior chuckled with her. More footsteps echoed from the dining hall toward the training rooms. The three queens turned to see Night approaching them, her blonde hair catching in the light coming through the dining hall windows. When she nodded at Warrior, the green-clad queen scoffed and stormed out of the training rooms, stepping through the wide doorway as far away from the blonde-haired queen as she could get. "What did you do to her?" Rico asked, surprising Kara with the curious tone of her voice. Night raised her eyebrow at the samurai and let out a long sigh. "Nothing. My people once ruled over hers, that's all. There's been bad blood between us ever since." "Before the conquerors," Rico said. Night stared after Warrior and nodded curtly. Yes, the Silver Queen sounded tired by the whole affair. In all honesty, the only thing that separates Knight and Warrior culture is chivalry. If I become queen, my first appointment would be to install chivalry as a rule of law throughout the Empire, which is what my people did for Warrior. Rico's face barely moved, but Kara saw the girl clenching her fist. "My people would die before we let some foreigner tell us how to live," the samurai said. Knight's eyes grew wide, and a light flush of color rose in her cheeks. "I certainly didn't mean to offend you. My apologies." Rico only stared at her, and for a brief moment, Kara thought her samurai friend would attack the Silver Queen. Knight blinked, then glanced at Kara with a barely perceptible nod. "Excuse me." Then the blonde-haired queen left the training room almost as quickly as Warrior had before her. When they were alone again, Kara turned slowly toward Rico. "Did you respond so harshly for a reason?" Rico eyed Kara strangely, as if it surprised her that Kara hadn't reacted in the same way. Good intentions don't make a bad idea any less dumb. How would the people of rider culture react to being told how they should live their lives? Kara opened her mouth to respond, but the gong ringing through the provincial palace stopped her. That must be for the demonstration, she said instead. Of what? Rico asked. Kara was growing wearisome of having to explain every detail of the Queenmaker series to Rico, but if she didn't, who else would take on the role? The second skin, she said, and nodded toward the dining hall and the great hall beyond. The queens who had not heard the gong were found and brought to the palace arena. Now, all 9 stood on the small stadium's lightly sanded floors. The man before them introduced himself as Jabir, the combat and training instructor for this year's Queenmaker series. My role is to ensure that each of you fights without injury. Outside the palace, this would be impossible, except for what I'm about to show you. He raised the large copper bowl in his hands, then lowered it in front of Knight at the end of the line closest to him. When he nodded, Knight dipped her hand into the bowl and pulled out what looked like translucent gray mud. Cover your exposed skin, Jabir called out, moving down the line so each queen could scoop out handfuls of the substance to smear over their skin not protected by armor. Kara thought it even felt like mud, both gritty and slick, as if it had been dredged from the riverbed. But she knew no river possessed anything in its rushing waters nearly as valuable as this. Once you've applied the second skin, Jabir added, you must wait before sparring or fighting with it. When Lancer, the last in line, had received her own handfuls of the substance and set to rubbing it over her neck and shoulders, the instructor turned to set the copper bowl upon the raised dais at the back of the arena. Now, we wait. The instructor stood with his legs firmly planted and hands clasped behind his back. He bowed his head to stare at the floor. 12 minutes seemed an awfully long time for the 9 queens to stand there, each of them wondering what to expect when the second skin had finished its necessary quickening time. Kara felt a light, cooling tingle rush over her skin where she'd smeared the substance. Finally, Jabir raised his head and asked, which of you does not have a match this round? Archer raised her hand. Step forward. When the Red Queen did as he asked, the instructor studied her. Hold out your arm. Archer complied, and in a flash, Jabir drew the dagger from his belt and brought the tip of the blade plunging into her forearm. Archer screamed and leapt back from him, instinctively cradling her arm against her chest. The instructor watched her with no expression whatsoever, and when the Red Queen quickly lowered her arm again to inspect it, her eyes widened. There was no blood on her arm. No wound at all. Archer flexed her fingers, turning her forearm over and back again, and one corner of her mouth lifted. Jabir sheathed his dagger and retrieved a wooden staff from the arena's dais. Lancer, he called. The Blue Queen stepped forward with her jaw clenched to receive a blow with the staff where her neck met her shoulders. She fell to her knees, grunted, then stood again. Assassin, the instructor called. He struck each queen in turn where their skin was protected by the second skin. Every one of them fell or staggered beneath his blows, and all of them stood again, sustaining no lasting damage, only a pain that quickly faded. Kara thought her entire hand had been crushed when Jabir cracked his staff against it, but it moved just fine a few seconds later. Second skin is your last defense, the instructor said, a final shield. It prevents any blade from piercing the skin. And just as with a shield, heavy erosion and repeated impact weaken its effectiveness. A precise and accurate blow from your opponent may leave a crack in the second skin. If you thought my gentle swats were painful, these cracks are like nothing any of you could possibly imagine. The man's brows drew together just a little when he added, I've heard it's as excruciating as childbirth. No competing queen has ever managed to continue fighting once their second skin has cracked. Until me, Ocean muttered, though it was quite loud enough for all of them to hear, including Jabir. Kara found the Orange Queen's remarks a bit obnoxious, but she couldn't help the smirk on her lips. The instructor ignored Ocean completely and gestured toward the weapons racks of long swords that had been brought into the arena. Now, you have the opportunity to spar with an opponent wearing second skin. Prepare yourselves for combat. Then, They paired off to begin. "Lancer?" Kara asked, stepping beside the girl in blue as Lancer lifted her own sword. Though she'd seen Blue Queen fighting Rico the next day in the opening match of the tournament's first round, Kara wanted to test Lancer's combat skills for herself. While she and her sparring opponent moved across the arena for an unoccupied place to train, Kara caught sight of Jabir approaching Rico, who had been left without a partner. The samurai nodded slowly at something the instructor said, then reached out to accept the sword Jabir offered her. Immediately, the instructor lunged with his own sword, which Rico quickly parried. In the few seconds before she turned her attention back to Lancer, Kara thought the saber culture instructor seemed fairly skilled with a sword. Lancer turned her head to sniff at her shoulder. "What is this stuff made of?" she asked with a scowl. "The flesh of dead conquerors?" Kara replied. Amidst the clash of battling steel, her comment was only loud enough for Lancer to hear. The Blue Queen looked quickly up at her and blinked. "What?" Kara took a deep breath. When they die, their skin is peeled from the corpse and boiled in a precise way. The product is second skin, but its real name is ethium. Who in their right mind would think up such an awful thing? Lancer sniffed at her shoulder again. Some archer culture alchemist, I think. Did you know it's one of the most highly sought-after commodities? Not just within the Eurasian Empire? Lancer blinked at her and tilted her head. "How do you know all this?" Kara shrugged. "I heard it off a passing trader." That was a lie, of course. Spending her entire life within the royal palace and surrounded by a household comprised of conquerors, she'd heard of the process for creating second skin in extensive detail. With a shrug, Lancer readied her sword and grinned. "Well then, let's put it to the test, shall we?" Kara had expected the Blue Queen to come on strong, but Lancer jerked her sword about as if she were swatting at flies. A weak stab at Kara's flank, a loose-gripped lunge at Kara's middle. All it did was force Kara to step aside and out of the way of such petty attempts to spar. "I like to watch you dance, Ryder," Lancer said, poking her sword at Kara's thigh so Kara only had to step away again as they circled each other. "Is your horse as skittish as you are?" When Kara frowned at that, Lancer threw her head back and let out a throaty laugh. Kara took that moment to strike, shifting forward to bring a two-handed strike up toward Lancer's ribs. The Blue Queen's laughter cut off abruptly, and Lancer parried Kara's swing with a speed she'd been hiding all along. Her jesting nature disappeared entirely, replaced by a girl Kara had not seen yet since they'd entered the provincial palace. Lancer lashed out with precision and skillful movement, pushing Kara back in defense. Kara found it impossible to move quickly enough out of Lancer's path, having to focus all her energy on parrying the Blue Queen's blows and deflecting the attacking sword away from reaching her flesh. Kara did not have the time to spin away without making herself vulnerable to Lancer's speed, and she barely managed a handful of successful blows against her sparring partner. Clearly, Lancer was indeed the better swordswoman, at least on foot, and Kara could only imagine how much more lethal the Blue Queen would be with a spear in her hand instead of a sword. Kara grunted at the sting of steel glancing off her shoulder. No wounds beneath the second skin, but that did not stop the pain. Then, a curdling scream echoed out from beside them, and all the queens stopped, lowering their weapons to see what had happened. Ocean lay curled up on the arena floor, clutching her knee and shrieking. Jabir approached her, knelt and lifted up the leg of her trousers to inspect her knee. "Seems you were a bit overconfident." Then he rose again and called to the queens. "This is what cracked second skin looks like." He gestured to a conqueror guard Kara had not noticed watching them from the entrance to the arena. The guard moved swiftly and bent down to lift the screaming Ocean into his arms. "You know I didn't mean it," Ocean shouted, glaring at Saber as they passed. The half-clad queen, still in her purple attire with the flowing silks, only raised her eyebrow and watched the guard carry Ocean toward the dining hall. "Continue," Jabir called, then nodded at Rico. "Samurai, you'll spar with Saber now." Rico nodded, then approached the queen in purple. They didn't waste any time in setting their swords against each other or bothering with niceties. From across the arena, Kara caught the other queen staring at Saber with suspicious eyes. The crack in Ocean's second skin had obviously not been accidental, and before Kara returned to sparring with Lancer, she made a note to tread carefully with Saber in the future. When Jabir finally called a halt to the sparring trial, he sent the queens to the bathhouse. None of them seemed remotely inclined to object, and the swords were returned to the weapons racks in short order. Then they filed out of the arena toward the bathhouse in their respective bathing gowns made of wool. Kara's hair was plastered to her face with sweat, her head feeling like it was on fire after such a long session, dancing around Lancer's remarkable attacks. Ocean was already in one of the bathhouse pools, soaking herself in the streaming waters with a grimace. Each queen took her own separate bath, and Kara found herself instantly satisfied by the heat washing over her aching muscles. Jabir had told them the second skin took an hour to soak before they could scrub it free. The permission to do nothing but sit there for so long felt like an incredible luxury before the start of the tournament. It didn't take Kara long to realize she'd been wrong about that. The heat of the pools and the steam in the air, mixed with the body's inability to breathe and sweat freely beneath the second skin, made that hour-long soak nearly unbearable. Only halfway through, Night called out from the cloud of steam rising from the pools. "Is anyone else finding it difficult to—" "Assassin!" Lancer shouted. But Assassin had already jumped from her bath, sending water everywhere and into Night's. The movement cleared the steam, and Kara saw that Night had fainted, her head slipping below the water before Assassin got to her and pulled her back up. Lancer slipped into the bath with the other members of her alliance, which made the water slosh over the edge of the pool. And together, she and Assassin propped Night up, gently smacking her cheeks to get her to come around. The other queens looked on in a haze of heat and exhaustion, but nobody else rose to help them. "Is that typical?" Rico asked from the pool beside Kara's. Kara turned to look at the samurai. "The second skin does strange things. It should keep us from scarring or bruising too, even if it's been cracked. If you do get an actual injury or cut, you have to report it immediately to Corbill." Rico frowned. "I have plenty of scars. What's one more?" "It's the recent scars they care about," Archer said from the same pool as Rico. "In the first few tournaments, queens were murdered, but before dying, they had inflicted defensive wounds on their killer. The king and his guards inspect the bodies of each of the queens, and the one who had unaccounted injuries or scars and no alibi were found guilty. They were executed," Kara added, quickly wiping away the sweat running into her eyes. "And the members of their alliances were also punished for not stopping them. They force us to spy on each other," Rico said. "It works." Archer grabbed one of the rough cloths beside her bath and scrubbed vigorously at her own body. "So, if you're planning to kill anyone, Samurai, Ryder and I will be the first to stop you." Kara watched Archer scrubbing the second skin away. The girl seemed to attack her own body with that cloth more intently than she'd sparred with her partner in the arena. After a few more minutes, Archer tossed the cloth onto the ground with a wet slap and heaved herself from the bath. "Where are you going?" Kara asked. Archer said nothing else, walking toward the bench to wrap herself in a robe before disappearing through the steam and out of the bathhouse. When Kara glanced at Rico, she found Lancer slipping into the samurai's bath. Hey yourself," replied Samurai. "What are you doing in my bath?" Lancer's long silver hair clung to the cream-colored water. "I was just curious if either of you have any ideas as to who the serious contenders are for this series," the Blue Queen asked. Feeling she'd been in the hot water long enough, Kara grabbed her own rough cloth to start scrubbing. "Saber," Rico said. Lancer raised an eyebrow and dipped her head. Lancer was impressed by that. "I think you're right." Lancer sat back against the wall of the bath and sighed. "You know, Samurai, I'm sure Ryder hasn't told you this yet, but do you know that each of us have private dinners with the prince?" The blue contending queen's eyebrows curved towards Kara, whose cheeks flushed red. "What?" Rico replied in disbelief. "It's true." Lancer smiled, showing her teeth. "I'll have several dinners with him. You'll have several dinners with him. What do you suppose you'll say to the prince when you have him all to yourself?" "I guess I'd talk about the war," replied Rico. "You?" Lancer's fingertips clattered against the bath's edge. "Same, but for different reasons. Tell me, how did the war play out from your perspective?" Kara didn't want to think about the war, let alone talk about it. She stood from her bath abruptly, and her wet feet slapped against the floor of the bathhouse as she got out. "Don't you want to stay?" Lancer asked. Kara walked toward the bench and grabbed a woolen robe. Talking about the war just depresses me." "Suit yourself," Lancer replied. Rico began recounting, and Kara left through the doors to a brisk, chilly air that grated her. When she arrived in the West Tower chambers, Kara found Archer already asleep in her canopy bed. Moving quietly, she slipped into her nightgown. Kara's limbs felt heavier than they'd ever been, her skin scrubbed raw to clear away the second skin. The exhaustion was overwhelming. Kara lay in her bed, buried herself beneath the covers, and couldn't have stayed awake even if her life depended on it.
Hey guys, so we're going to be reading the last chapter of Queen Games. So let's get stuck into it.
Yes, she shall.
Okay. So that was how the prince found her, with his hand over her mouth to quieten her scream, as she woke up in horror to find him standing over her, blanketed in darkness. His other hand had a finger pressed against his lips, indicating for her to keep quiet. The prince pointed to Rico and Archer, who were still asleep in their lavish beds. He released his hand from her mouth and indicated for her to follow him outside into the tower room. Kara quickly did as she was bid and followed him down the stairs without even a torchlight to help guide her. The prince walked so incredibly smooth she could barely hear him. If you didn't see him, that'd be terrible. He's right in front. But managed to keep up as the two of them entered the hot steaming baths. The hot water was still rushing as the prince took a seat and waited for Kara to join him. She did, sitting on the edge of a copper bath opposite him. The prince's eyes scanned the room, though, to make sure there was nobody present before leaning forward and speaking under his breath. "You are not safe," he told her bluntly. "These girls are already planning to do you harm as we speak. My guards overheard Ocean telling Saber and Warrior how tragic it would be if you fell down the long stairs or slipped in the baths." Neither the purple nor emerald contending queens responded to her provocation. English is definitely my second language, people. But neither did they accuse her of saying such a thing. Assassin is also watching you. After being assigned to your towers, she followed you in samurai for the rest of the day. My conqueror guards were spread too thin that I didn't even know what Lancer and Knight were up to at the time. I only have 3 conqueror guards, 1 to watch each tower. At the moment, I think the 7 contending queens are content with letting themselves be watched. But that's only because they choose to be. I didn't realize the other girls would be this dangerous. I thought maybe 1 or 2, but not all of them. Challenging.
Very interesting, isn't it?
"What do you mean dangerous?" Kara asked. "They're all psychopaths, just like my mum. I could feel it at dinner. There isn't a shred of humanity left in any of them after the training they have endured." Kara was stunned. The prince went on, pleading with her. "Kara, if they find out I am planning to choose you to be my queen, they will kill you." The prince avoided looking at her and she noticed the muscles on his neck tightening harder. "I moved onto the South Tower, so I'll be able to keep a careful watch over you. But I have other duties I must attend to. So I thought I'd just have one of my guards watch over you at all times. But that won't be enough. Not even close." Kara didn't know if it was the heat emanating from the baths surrounding her or the shock of being awoken so abruptly in her sleep. But she couldn't understand what the prince was getting at. "What are you saying?" she finally asked. The prince sighed. "I won't be able to keep you safe." He looked so pained to say it, so hurt and vulnerable, as though this was a feeling he had never contended with his entire life. Kara pursed her lips together and looked down at her feet, watching the pooling water beneath them, seeping in between her toes, and told him, "I know." The prince clasped his hands firmly around hers. "Kara, I don't care about rider culture winning this year's Queen Games tournament. I just want you to live, and I can't guarantee your safety here. So if you want to leave, grab Sasha and ride out of here tonight. No one will stop you. No one will force you to come back and compete. Taro, that other rider culture girl you occasionally train with, will take your place. You'll be free to live whatever life you want and be happy." Kara thought heavily about what the prince was saying. She had the skills to find work anywhere in Eurasia. She was still young. She could find someone, get married, and have children like she always wanted. Kara slipped her hands from under the prince's and wrapped them around his face before saying, "The only life I want is by your side."
Romantic.
"Eventually, one of these girls will realize my feelings for you and they will try to kill you," the prince reiterated. Kara studied the creases on his face. She had never seen so many before, probably because she had never seen the prince with so much concern. Whether he was fighting 1 man or 20, he never showed concern. It's probably the most attractive thing she had ever seen on him. And you're right, I didn't know the Queen Games would be this dangerous before yesterday. But having had time to think it over, so what? I don't particularly want to be queen, but being queen is the only way you and I can be husband and wife. So what choice do I have? You can choose to leave. Even after becoming queen, it won't stop. There will be plots and wars waiting for the rest of our lives. That's why we conqueror princes marry girls like assassin, archer, saber, and lancer. They have a vested interest in keeping us alive so that until their son can take our place. Do you see? It's just a transaction between us. We conquerors are good at fighting, but not much else. So we marry devious, conniving women who will give us power, allying enough for the cultures onto our side to keep the Eurasian Empire together. There is no place for love in this arrangement. It's a sacrifice we need to keep order and peace. Kara pulled the prince in and asked, "Is that the kind of marriage you want? A transaction?" The prince closed his eyes and Kara breathed in assent. "No," he admitted. Kara leaned forward. "Then how could I possibly leave you to marry someone you don't even want?" "Kara," the prince pleaded, grasping her fingers, "no one is going to kill me. But if the other girls find out that I am planning to choose you at the end of this Queen Games, then I will be signing your death warrant." With his hands around hers, Kara stroked the creases on his face, running her finger along one of them. "You know, I've always wanted to be with you, even when we were little, and as much as I'd like to kiss you right now, I won't. And you can't kiss me, either. Do you understand? You can only kiss me when I'm standing beside you as your queen. The only exception for you to kiss me is..." Kara looked down at the wood-puddled floor with water and imagined it was her own blood. "Is if I'm a corpse, lying there in the palace. You can kiss me then to say goodbye. But just know that when your lips touch mine, I died with no regrets because I was made for you and you were made for me. And nothing else matters." And that is the end of the chapter, guys. Hi guys, thanks for listening to us read the last chapter. So we are just going to go through the choices that you guys can make for what should happen next. So who should Kara, the prince, and samurai ally with? You have 4 choices, and they are archer, knight, lancer, and warrior. And so we're really interested to see who you guys are going to pick to have an alliance with. If you would like to vote, you can go down to our community tab down below and just place your vote there, and we will read out the next choices. Can't wait to see what you guys choose. Thank you.